In this video for PokerNews.com, we have a hand featuring Rampage Poker. He gets in there, he battles, he punts it off sometimes. Today we're playing a $3,500 buy-in tournament at the Seminole Hard Rock Poker Open. On day 2, we are playing 6,000, 12,000 with a 12,000 big blind ante, playing 380,000 chips deep. So, a little bit more than 30 big blinds. We're under the gun +1 with ace-10 of diamonds. Let's get to it.
Ace-10 of diamonds in +1, raised up to 25,000, and the big blind makes the call. The flop is amazing in 10-10-6, 2 hearts.
Nice.
Lovely, lovely flop. My opponent checks it over to me here. I'm certainly going to fire out a bet as I would with all my weak holdings. So with the strongest holdings, I'm going to bet 2 for 18,000.
You may be surprised to see such a small bet into the 68,000 chip pot, but this is a spot where you usually want to go for a small size because your opponent will have a whole lot of 10s in their range. And given your opponent's going to have a whole lot of 10s, and you're only going to have some, because remember we did open from early position. We don't have the 10-9 offsuit, right? You have to be a little bit cautious, and in general, you're going to want to bet small with everything you want to bet. You definitely don't want to bet this flop with everything, but when you do bet, you want to bet small, even when you do have one of the best hands.
And music to my ears right off the bat. This opponent check raises to 45,000. How amazing is that with trips, top kicker? I have
all right, 18 to 45. All right.
the second nuts essentially. I'm trying to get it all in here. You don't see this often, but I decided to actually re-raise again on this flop. I click it to 100,000 over his raise. My opponent goes into the tank for quite some time. Tension is high. I'm certainly starting to be nervous and feeling the nerves through his hand as it might be a big one. And he clicks it himself. He makes another raise to 155,000.
Okay. 18, 45, 100, 150. What is going on here? We are playing in Florida. They get after it in Florida sometimes. Look, I like it when people click buttons more than most. It's a lot of fun. You never really know what's going on. And what I want to know in this scenario is, if you were in Rampage's shoes, what would you do at this point? Would you call? Would you click it back again to 200? Or would you go all in for 355? Take a second, think about it, and write what you would do in the comments section down below. And while you're down there, click the like and subscribe button for me. This is one of the spots where if you can look and tell, because you're playing live poker, that your opponent likes their hand, you just want to rip it all in. You may say, why would you shove with this hand? Well, you're actually quite vulnerable to being outdrawn, and very importantly, if your opponent has a 10 themselves, they're very vulnerable to being outdrawn. Plus, there are a lot of draws available in this spot. Flush draws, obviously. So, if your opponent has a 10, and you shove it all in, they're just not going to fold. Whereas if the turn is a bad card for them, like, say, the 9 of hearts, putting up a random straight and a flush, and making Jack 10 and Queen Jack a little bit worse because now they lose to 10-9, they may find a fold. So if you can look and tell they have a 10, I love shoving. I'm not going to click it back or anything like that, because when you click it again, you're now giving whatever draws your opponent has in their range amazing pot odds, while also making it kind of tough for them to continue bluffing. If, however, you think your opponent's range is much weaker, perhaps with lots of junky draws like 8-7, Queen Jack of spades, stuff like that, you definitely want to call. And if you're playing in Florida against people who make all sorts of random plays, I would definitely call, again, because if they do have some nonsense and they're just trying to push you around and show you who's boss, well, let them show you and then gobble up their chips. So I would call at this point, even though I do realize you are letting the draws realize their equity.
Wow. I mean, I can't do anything here besides call, right? Because obviously another raise is super, super strong, and I'm hoping he has a 10, and that's it. I decided to make the call for the extra 55,000. I kind of wished my opponent made it a little bigger, but here we are. We're going to a turn which comes the 9 of diamonds. A little bit scary as I do lose to 10-9, but whatever, so be it. But what's very confusing is that my opponent decides to check. After 4-betting the flop, my opponent checks, and I'm a little confused. This action kind of threw me for a loop. I'm not sure what's going on, trying to process what is happening here in this hand with trips and top kicker. How am I able to get it all in? And I kind of think about betting a small amount in this decision, but really I only have like 200,000 left in my stack. The pot is massive, and I'm not going to get caught up in this fancy play syndrome. I decided to just go all in and be standard and shove.
I want to make it clear, an all in here is only half pot. If Rampage was deeper, like a pot size bet remaining, maybe he can justify a small bet, but even then, I don't mind a big shove because, again, on this 9 of diamonds turn, if your opponent has a 10, they're just not going to fold, right? And you don't want to bet 100 out of, let's say, 400 if we were a little bit deeper, have your opponent call with a 10 and then get a terrible river and you have to check it back, right? Or sometimes you give them good odds with whatever flush draws they have. They call the turn and then they spike on you, right? So this is a spot where you, again, just want to put money in the pot because now, if your opponent has a 10, they're going to call. And if they have a flush draw, you don't really care if they fold for half pot. So definitely a good shove by Rampage. He's not punting this time.
I'm all in. My opponent snap calls with Jack 10. Ultimate cooler trips over trips. River ace. Let's freaking go. I have a massive stack now after this cooler, and it's always nice to be on the right side of these hands. GG's to my opponent here, unfortunately, but, very nice, and it feels good to not give up after losing the big one with queens after being carded for 7 hours. Whew, this feels really good. It's like getting the monkey off my back, and here, let's start cruising into this tournament.
Feels good, man. Look, you got to realize whenever you do have a tough start to a tournament, you cannot give up. I think one of the reasons I, in particular, have done very well in poker tournaments throughout my career is that if I do have a bad start to a tournament, I don't give up. I sit there, I play reasonably, and I grind it out. And sometimes you grind out of it. What a lot of players do very incorrectly is that they lose half their stack early, let's say. The blinds go up, they're sitting there with 12 big blinds, and they think, well, I need to gamble. But if 12 big blinds is like half a starting stack, and let's say we're playing a $3,500 tournament, that's $1,700. You don't want to just rip it all in with nonsense for $1,700. That's not a good way to make money. Instead, sit there, play sanely, and continue to grind. And sometimes good things happen, sometimes it doesn't. But as long as you're making profitable decisions in the long run, over and over and over and over and over again, the equity will flow your direction, and eventually, the equity will turn into dollars. That's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, click the like and subscribe button down below. Huge thanks to Rampage for letting us use this footage. And we actually have another video lined up right after this one where Rampage is playing a high stakes tournament against some of the best players in the world.